the intersection between hospitality and trafficking is there. It's real. And so to not acknowledge it gives the traffickers a lot more power. So what's happening right now in the industry with AHLA, no room for trafficking that you mentioned, and the big players really getting engaged at how can we show up proactively to to be a part of the solution, recognizing that this intersection exists. And I can tell you in conversations with um, those, the large players within the space, the desire is there and the struggle. You get to a place where it's like, yeah, we'll hire, great. How do you, without a technology platform that makes it easy on both sides? It's like, okay, if you have someone in this city that wants it, then have your advocate check our hiring website once a week, and if they see something, they can contact this guy, and it's different in this city, and it isn't scalable. It doesn't work in any kind of a way that we can roll out to the entire movement. And so that's really what we're trying to fix. Yeah, I think, for me, my 20s, for my husband and I, our 20s and even early 30s were very insular and focused on our careers, and we had kind of the 60, 80 hour careers. My husband still does. And my kids turned 3 and 4 in what felt like one season, and I just wanted to have more impact and be a part of positive change. But at that point, I had accumulated this very specific skill set, right, around um, processes and transparency and making things repeatable and scalable, and connecting with people on topics that can feel complicated or challenging, and bringing people together. And so it seemed, when I was transitioning out of the corporate world, like an opportunity to really pick a place of vulnerability and opportunity for positive change in the world, and started kind of researching all of the very many ways that problems and things that need help and love and change. And when I started to unravel and really understand what was happening with uh, trafficking, labor and sex trafficking of humans in the United States, that really was a strong call to action for me. It was something where, once you know, you can't unknow, and it just sat with me as unacceptable. I started thinking a lot about my grandmother, who used to talk all the time about how the enormous human potential within everybody, but how it requires community for people to be able to realize it and show up. Um, and so that really became kind of a guiding light for me to pursue getting involved within the anti trafficking movement, and very specifically to look at what my skill set, my unique skill set, could do and bring to what was happening versus just good intent, or broad concern.
What was that initiation point? Because I think that it's important to bring the audience back to that um, that jump off period. You're standing at the edge of this cliff and you know that you're not going to be working inside of this sales executive role anymore. What brought you to that jumping point? And then, like, really what led you to jump? I understand you mentioned community. Um, there are a lot of people that are working in 60, 80 hour week jobs, or in situations that are far darker than that, and they know that it's time to jump. So, really bring us into that mindset of what made you decide that it's going to be okay if you do jump.
That's a great question. And look, I think there's a tremendous amount of individual things that happen that put people in a position to go for it or not go for it. In my situation, um, my husband wasn't jumping. He's, stayed in his career, and it allowed us to take some risk that might not be available to everyone. I think that there's a saying, leap and the net will appear, and that has not been my experience in life. It's more like, leap and fall flat on your face, and then figure it out and get up and get the right people around you, and build something that that stands the test of time, but not immediately. It's very much a try it, fix it, try it uh, approach to life. And um, for me, I was pursuing a goal that I'd always had to write a novel, and that freed up a lot of time because you don't sit down and write for 14 hours a day. And I was used to working 14 hours a day. So I suddenly had the availability of time was part of my ability to um, do this work. And then, catching the fever of this topic. I think it really, man, it gave me a virus that I couldn't, at night I couldn't stop thinking about the fact that this was happening on the scale that it was happening in our backyard in every city and every state. And so I think the combination of those three things that I had the opportunity, the luxury of the opportunity to engage, um, that I had a topic that I was passionate enough and worked up enough about that I wanted to do it, um, and that all of these other life skills, life experiences that seem not connected, were connected in this case of a way to look at the problem or the solutions to the problem differently.
And then that brought you to found Empower Her Network, which is now Empowered Network. Um, that's crucial that you're bringing over skills from your corporate life into this co-founding of an organization. So tell us a little bit about the organization's direction, and what brought you to kind of put these pieces together and bring people together to really kind of this pinpoint accuracy of Empower Her Network as it was first founded.
Yeah, absolutely. So I co-founded Empowered Network with clinician Christy Norbert. It's really important to know that I am not the genius behind uh, the execution day to day of this program because you need a clinical background and a lot of experience to do that well. I'm more the back end, the transparency for the data, the board, the engagement, getting people to understand the gap in services that we solve. So why we exist, in I'm a data geek, and looking at the spectrum of services available and where it was falling short within the anti-trafficking movement, it was very clear that we had a problem with services ending too soon. So uh, today, right now, in most cities and states, services for trafficking survivors tend to end right when initial stability is achieved. And all of these systemic barriers that exist for all marginalized populations still exist for them. So they remain extremely vulnerable, like 80+% vulnerable to re-trafficking, experiencing homelessness, children getting trapped within the exploitation cycle. So the stakes are really high. And as as communities, states, local governments, and nonprofits um, invest in survivors of trafficking in the service cycle, it's really expensive. For a survivor who stays in the service cycle their entire lives, that's estimated at $5.3 million per survivor. So to end services too soon is the most expensive way to not solve a problem. And it's really important that we show up at that 5 yard line for those remaining stubborn barriers because, consider it, how do you go from residential housing to your first apartment with no credit and no savings? Or take advantage, even if you got a full scholarship, take advantage of education opportunities if you can't afford childcare or the transportation to get there or know how to navigate financial aid opportunities at the forefront. So there's a lot of connecting pieces that are tied into barriers around advocacy, housing, education, and employment. And if we can show up to survivors and meet them, listen to what their barriers are, and address those final stops and barriers to their independence, then survivors become their own solution. They know what they need, right? They know what the problems are. They need practical financial support and advocacy to address them.
I've always been curious about this. How do you identify survivors?
Yeah, so our program is beyond the crisis services, which means that we don't exist without all those programs doing the incredibly important work of getting to a place of initial stability. We partner nationally with over 80 immediate aftercare programs, legal aid organizations, residential housing shelters. And when they're working with a survivor who's at that critical juncture where services are expiring, we know that these societal barriers remain. The survivor has a want to be independent and to get to this next level. Instead of having the cold handoff to society that we know statistically is unsuccessful, they instead get nominated into Empowered Networks program in the 10 trafficking hotbed locations that we're in today. And then they're paired with their advocate and begin our 1 year program together, tackling those final barriers to independence.
And then on the ground, that support that you're talking about, it sounds like it comes in a multitude of different forms. But for example, you were talking a little bit about housing. Is that like direct payments? Is that like direct rental payments, or is it more you guys have units in that you're getting people through them? What does it actually look like on that survivor side?
Yeah, absolutely. So for housing, as an example, um, we are not residential or providing shelter or anything like that. We're working with survivors who are at the place where um, if these barriers to housing didn't exist, they would be getting their first apartment. So our financial support comes in the face of the barriers to getting your first apartment. For example, working on budgeting to understand what they can afford for monthly rent, and then paying the security deposit, last month rent, that giant first month financial hurdle that makes it so that people can't get their first apartment. Acting as a reference when that's necessary for people who don't have a large community of mentorship or networking, and helping to navigate from an advocacy perspective, helping to navigate complex housing markets, and programs and availability, to get to the right place. So the goal of the program is really to tackle um, the barrier, in this case, housing, at its root in a way that once they're out of the program, they'll be able to sustainably get housing in the future. So if we can get a survivor into an apartment with a lease in her name that's going to make build her credit long term, that's a win.
Yeah, that's absolutely a win. I mean, just imagining that scenario for somebody, I feel like I can already connect with that. Um, uh, you guys have a lot of different ways that you're coming at this. It's something that I found very interesting. We had a previous conversation with a couple of other organizations inside of this fight, and both of them were approaching it with such different sides of the problem. And you're coming at it from a completely different side of the problem. So it's just like amazing how large and present this problem in society is, and also amazing how these different advocacy groups are kind of tackling it. I think that another way that you're tackling it includes a technological approach. Tell me a little bit about your new initiative that you guys are putting together on the technology side.
Yeah, absolutely. We have just secured funding for a pilot program, so it's not baked yet, but we're partnering with two other incredible organizations, Elevate Academy and Annie Cannons, for a collective impact initiative called Thrive Connect Collaborative. And it's really about a tech enabled platform that links survivors of trafficking to career opportunities with best in class companies and allows learning on both sides, right? So we're working with to build up with corporations, what do they need to have inclusive hiring practices within the survivor community, and how can we show up with a readiness factor that is compatible with their hiring structure. And for survivors, how can we, it's almost like a platform, uh, but specific to the survivor community. So how can we make that trauma informed and that experience something that case managers can access with the survivor that they're working with, so that they can have a shared guided um, trauma-informed experience of looking for work. And we're really excited for the partnerships that are forming and where it's headed. Ultimately, what's happening today is that all of the nonprofits, like the three of us that are starting this, are trying to get, if you look at the importance of doing work on education and employment, whether it's readiness, all of the things that are tied to employment, if it's not connected with access to a real job on the back end, it's for nothing, right? It falls flat. So this initiative is aimed at solving that problem in a scalable way. Because today we have all these nonprofits that are working on individual relationships with corporations. It's incredibly time intensive, and no one organization has enough survivors ready to be placed in any one company to make it worth the cycles on from a corporation's perspective. So the idea here is that if we can build the right technology and test it and have corporations buying into what we're doing and having great placements with one of the hardest working communities that you can hire within too, then we can open up that platform to other nonprofits that also have readiness factors accounted for so that we can really in a scalable way create employment opportunities and access to them.
Yeah, that's that final piece. You're right that everything kind of falls flat if it doesn't end up with a job at the end of the day. You can do as much training as you like, and then they're not going to be equipped for society if they're not bringing in revenue into their lives. And then off the top of my head, because this is almost a more hospitality podcast in my life, my background is often characterized as hospitality focused. I'm just imagining all of the different roles in hospitality that would be perfect for this kind of a platform. I mean, if HR directors in hotels were connected with this through line of candidates, I'm sure that we've got plenty of open roles that could, a hotel could benefit, for example, or a restaurant could benefit from hiring these people.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And we see a strong desire from the hospitality industry, IHG, Marriott, Hilton to be a part of that transition to economic independence for the survivor community. The intersection between hospitality and trafficking is there. It's real. And so to not acknowledge it gives the traffickers a lot more power. So what's happening right now in the industry with AHLA, no room for trafficking that you mentioned, and the big players really getting engaged at how can we show up proactively to to be a part of the solution, recognizing that this intersection exists. And I can tell you in conversations with um, those, the large players within the space, the desire is there and the struggle. You get to a place where it's like, yeah, we'll hire, great. How do you, without a technology platform that makes it easy on both sides? It's like, okay, if you have someone in this city that wants it, then have your advocate check our hiring website once a week, and if they see something, they can contact this guy, and it's different in this city, and it isn't scalable. It doesn't work in any kind of a way that we can roll out to the entire movement. And so that's really what we're trying to fix.
Yeah, it becomes very complicated because of the way that hotels are franchised and there's management companies and it comes down to individual owners. So there's really not like a platform wide resource that everybody can access on any given um, you know solution. Like the brand isn't necessarily recommending a particular hiring website. Not to my knowledge. Greg, you can feel free to jump in here because you've got more insights on the background of the hiring side. But do you see that?
No, every company is going to use their own software and sites to do their hiring and recruiting. So yeah, it's not very common to see one thing for. I mean, like a managed hotel, like Hilton managed, Marriott managed, they'll use one site, but all the different franchises have whatever their management company wants to use. Yeah.
Yeah, and so this is an iterative pilot. I think that as it relates to the hospitality industry, the people who participate probably will start with their managed sites, and that's how we've been working like Marriott has their FIT program that Empowered Network participates in, is in a trial phase of right now. And I think similarly for that, when they go to have placements, they are focused on where they have the most access and control for today. And that makes sense, and it maps to where the service hot spots are for trafficking hotbeds as well.
Yeah, it sounds very promising as something that would absolutely solve that final component, and then at the same time so incredibly complicated to where it's not only in the hospitality industry, but now you got to look at all of the other industries that this would have to make itself present in. And in my mind, I'm thinking like a massive marketing push, or almost like a partnership with an existing platform, or even LinkedIn has their own hiring platform now. It's like it almost would have that kind of tie-in with an existing platform too. But now I'm brainstorming for you, so I don't want
No,
to
no, I so
spitballing.
appreciate it. We actually do. We're at the, just secured funding. We're at the pilot stages. We
Yeah.
do have the company platform that's agreed to work with us. So we're very excited to have something that is tangible and working. We're hoping by July for the three organizations to test it out. And then we're hoping going into 2026 to be able to open it up to more organizations for use.
Wow. Okay. So by 2026, that's a pretty quick timeline there too.
Yeah,
So that's
we'll see. But we're it's mapped out. If we can get the
I
roadmap and everything done,
I
it'll be
love it.
exciting.
Power ahead. I mean, it sounds like something that once put together will put that final end cap on all of the other aspects of advocacy that you're working on with Empowered Network. And I was going to ask you on Empowered Network. It was founded as Empower Her Network. Tell us a little bit about the transition in title and how that changed the structure of the services that you provide.
Sure. I mean, it's obviously not a fall off your chair name change. We went from Empower Her Network to Empowered Network. And it didn't come with a change in programming. We've always served all survivors who were ready for the program. But I think with even a little more foresight at the front end, we probably would have caught that um, to force. We are 97% serving females, but we're serving uh, 1% male, 1% non-binary, and 1% trans. I'd have to look at it. I'll have to go back and get you the exact statistics. But for anybody participating in our program to not feel connected or a part of the community because of our name seemed like a miss. And so that was just a correction.
All good. I wasn't sure if there was a larger story behind it, but um, so from our audience's perspective, they're looking at Empowered Network. They themselves might not, are likely not inside of a situation where they need your services. And if they are, then your website is empowerednetwork.com. You guys can take a look at their offerings and find out the best way to get nominated. Individuals would have to go through organizations that they're working with to get nominated for access to these resources, correct?
Yes, we work
Okay.
with local ones in certain areas, and then we also work with some national programs. So it's pretty easy to get access if you're in a position where you're ready for the program.
Excellent. And then for the listeners of our audience that are ready to get involved, what are some of the ways that they can just directly, boots on the ground, actually begin to make an impact today?
Everyone who's interested in engaging with the anti-trafficking movement, there is a place for you. And we would love for it to be within the Empowered Network family. But if it's not, we'd also love to connect you to where it is because we have these 80 national partners that are all doing such important work. I think for us, we have a lot of people who take an interest in wanting to support empowerment plans. That's what our 1 year program is, and so they might create uh, a fundraising pot and host a golf tournament or a pickleball tournament or a bunko night or have something annually. We have a lot of fundraising that happens that way. That's extremely successful. Um, obviously connections into employment opportunities, if you're tied to foundations, places and connections that you can make within uh, corporations, governments, for jobs, for funding. All of those things are welcomed conversations that we'd love to hear from you about. And then we have certain people who come in um, on our advisory board, on our board, or as volunteer staff who play very specific roles. We have someone on our board who does all of our website and marketing for us. It's that saves us a lot of money and allows us to put unrestricted funding back into increasing capacity. We have volunteer who has, someone in our program who is graduating law school and someone who was able to give mentorship as a lawyer. Same thing with real estate. So people who have interest in mentorship on career specific paths. Um, and, I think more broadly for the anti-trafficking movement as a whole, um, this is a business. And the people who are making money trafficking humans will do everything they can to find the supply to meet demand. So something that we all can do is curb demand wherever we see it. And that can be starting with things like really analyzing for yourself and in your family, like what you laugh off as happening at a bachelor party or those sorts of cultural um, communes. And then also um, knowing and understanding the signs of trafficking happening within your community, at nail salons, at restaurants, at, at hotels, and making sure that you know about the National Trafficking Hotline, that you're participating in identifying where and when it's happening, and not turning your.
Yeah, it's so important because these we can talk about like the oftentimes you might get caught up in talking about the initiatives or the programs or the solutions, but this is a real human problem. These are real people with real stories that are really dealing with extreme trauma. So it's contextualizing the whole conversation from that lens. Um, I'm
Yeah,
sure you've got a lot more to speak on that than I do.
there's a quotation that someone brought up in a staff call the other day that's been just on my mind, and it said, the fundamental delusion of humanity is to suppose that I am here and you are out there. And I think as it relates to trafficking, um, if one of us is affected, all of us are affected. And when we look at, the last numbers came out that 55%, I think it was 2021, 55% of trafficking in the United States, the recruitment happened online, on social platforms, on um, uh, with phishing exercises on Instagram and Facebook. And so all of a sudden that starts to feel a lot closer to your home, right? If you have a 13-year-old kid, the average age of sex trafficking in the United States for girls is 13. You have a 13-year-old kid who is excited to have her first kiss. She is vulnerable. And I think that connecting to the problem, especially if you look at where people invest their time in philanthropy, it tends to be things that they have a personal connection to. So alma maters, diseases, animal shelters, those types of things. And it's important in some of these systemic rooted problems in our society that we start to understand that there is a personal connection to these. They seem and feel very far away, but they're not very far away. I had heard a survivor leader speak a couple years ago who was trafficked by her rural high school track coach. And she said something that stuck with me as a parent. She said, we talk to our children all the time about stranger danger, but we need to talk to them more about tricky people, because that's what fraud and coercion is. And we all have a universal need for connection and for love. So I think it's teasing out this problem that feels very far away, and recognizing that it's happening in your community. Um, so you shouldn't be ignoring
Yeah, I think that's a great point on the stranger danger and how we're educating our children because um, I learned in the most recent conversation that the ProTech podcast had, that people are introduced to human trafficking from a family member, where a family member will traffic them. And that's, that's not a stranger. That's a tricky person. That's somebody that's um, has a negative intent or a bad, um, something horrible in mind that is going to take advantage of a child.
Yeah,
Um,
generational trafficking is incredibly common, um, as is, certain vulnerabilities in our society, like foster care, for example. Um, what is being exploited, like within the immigrant community, is that lie or fraud of come to America for this job that is um, working as a nanny or working as and then it doesn't prove to be that way. For American born trafficking victims, it is often the universal need for love and affection, for housing, for food. So, you're highly vulnerable if you're in the foster care system, if you're a runaway. The idea of somebody showing up and saying, "Can I take you out to ice cream?" Getting you, I heard a story one time where someone was conveying that they lost, were exploited in the last 10 years of their life over someone giving them shoelaces that were the same color as their backpack. And that they had not been attached or had mentorship or had guidance in their life to such an extreme extent that that was the price for them. That was like, yeah, okay, this person loves me. Um, so there's a lot to unpack there, but I think uh, if we show up as a community for the people around us in a bigger way, then there's a lot less for traffickers to exploit. So, all of us thinking about how we show up to the more vulnerable people within our immediate communities or at a state level, um, that also is a very important preventative and protective tool.
how can our audience members donate to Empowered Network? Um, what do you prefer that they do? Can they actually volunteer for Empowered Network? Or are you, I apologize for not knowing off the top of my head if they're able to actually get involved directly with your organization.
Sure. So we provide trauma informed services, which means that it's not like a loose preventative big brother, big sister type program where you can hop in and interact with directly with the survivors that we're um, servicing without the clinical or trauma background to do that. But we have a lot of volunteers. Our marketing is almost entirely volunteer. Um, uh, our legal aid, so if you have skill sets within, we need everything that any business needs. You absolutely can volunteer to that end. And if you're in a position as a connector for employment, for corporate employment, for jobs, tied to the Thrive Connect Collaborative, for example. Those are all places where we would welcome connectors and volunteers. Donations, absolutely. Like most nonprofits, pick how you want to donate. You come to our website. We have a Venmo account. You can through your DAF. You can you know foundations, government grants. We have all of the ways that people contribute financially. And hosting events at your house will support that. Come and have speakers, and we do a lot of things like that. A lot of fun events, golf events, things that align with your interests and allow you to get your community just a little piece of awareness. Sometimes, we have golf events that raise $70,000, and there's a 5-minute talk about it, but it's much more about the community coming together, basic awareness, and raising money for Empowered Network. So all of those things are certainly options. And we'd love to hear from you if you want to engage in the movement, whether it ends up being us or not. We would help connect you. The more people who are in the fight, the better.
It sounds amazing as an opportunity for somebody who has skills that are whether in connecting people or marketing or all of the other facets of your organization that require hands to come in and to get involved, because that's something that even on the personal side somebody can put on their resume and say, hey, I provide marketing support for this organization and this is what they do. and it provides you real-time skills and really gets you involved in um, not only doing something that's good for your community, but also good for your career.
Yeah, 100%. And it really is impactful directly to survivors because that's money we don't have to now spend that we can put into added capacity for the program. So, like, I'll give an example right now. We would love a professional video that we could have on our website that we could link to in proposals. Those are very expensive. If someone's out there starting their business and wants to volunteer that, that would be incredibly impactful for us. Similarly, someone who manages social media, it's not our subject matter expertise. We don't have the funding to dedicate to that in terms of it moving the needle more than where we could put that funding otherwise. So if we had a volunteer doing it, that would be of great importance to the community today. So there are so many pieces like that that nonprofits would benefit from, where it truly is impacting the community at the front line because more of them are getting access to the program.
And if you're a social media person or a videographer that has a small video business that wants to put this together, you can reach out to Abby on LinkedIn. You've got an open public profile that people are able to connect with you and find you. I'm sure that that's something that they would be able to absolutely do if they're looking to make a direct impact.
It's the best. My favorite days are when someone reaches out and says, "Can we provide this for you at no cost to help your cause?"
Yeah,
Yes, yes, you can. Let's do it.
right. You've got limited resources, so let's make it happen. Abby, it's been a pleasure speaking with you. I really enjoyed learning something about your organization and a little bit more about the fight that we're all involved in to stop human trafficking and end human trafficking. Thank you for joining us for this episode of the ProTech Podcast. And guys, if you would like to get involved, you can find Abby again for a direct volunteer opportunity. You can go to her LinkedIn, just send her a message, and it's going to be going into her email, or go to Empowered Networks website. Go ahead and donate. Find your way, whatever works for you. It's kind of a choose your own adventure type of approach.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, guys.